Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Hello to everybody and welcome to today's RURB webinar, session 3 and 4. It is a joint session that's going to last for 2 hours from 10:30 to 12:30 p.m. I am Haji Abdul Rahman bin Haji Abdul Rahim, the MPC's associate. It is my pleasure and honor to moderate this RURB webinar series. This is our final series. Our third series webinar session end in disaster due to technical glitch. My apology and on the inconvenient cost due to unavoidable circumstances. Our redemption is that we will schedule 2 hours coverage of this webinar for the pleasure of the audience. This RURB webinar series was brought and sponsored to you by RURB Unit of Malaysian National Productivity, MPC in short. Our main speaker on this webinar is Professor Dr. Sufyan Yusof. Okay, just for your information, we have quite a substantial die-hard fan and followers that I was told by organizer that we have a very good response and a wide diversity of audience for our RURB webinar series in day 1 till today. Let me introduce the agenda. Our today's topic is NTN as NTB and the hindrance to the productivity in developing economies. That was to cover back the RURB webinar series number 3. Also today, we will include the RURB webinar series number 4 is to impose and to comply the hidden and the non-hidden cost of NTM. I leave the liberty for Professor Dr. Sofia to either join up these 2 sessions in one go or we'll break out into 2 sessions. Our RURB webinar series. Okay, first we have the first series is NTM in the era of COVID-19 for the health and the safety to protectionism. The first series was held on the 21st October, this Wednesday, at 3 o'clock to 4 p.m. Okay. Follow with, we have the second series. The second session is the importance of compliance with NTM in increasing productivity and quality. That was held on the 23rd October. That was on Friday from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. in the morning. The next series, that was our third series, entering in disaster. That was our topic, was supposed to be NTN as NTB and the hindrance to productivity in developing countries. So we believe that it's about 20% technical issues and 80% are actually human costs of this reason. That is our third session. But we shall combine with our fourth session today especially. We will combine the webinar series number 3 and webinar series number 4. That's our today's session. Okay. The topic is NTN as NTB and the hindrance to the productivity and the developing economies. That is webinar number 3. Then webinar number 4, to impose and to comply the hidden cost and the non-hidden cost of NTM. Okay. Non-tariff barrier have caused unnecessary barrier to trade as for business, especially for developing countries. This business struggle to access international market due to the non-tariff barrier, mainly due to the complex regulation or the required infrastructure that required to be met by the regulation and standard. The session number 3 will discuss the relevant issues and the potential policy solution for developing countries and their business. I think Dr. Sofyan will deliberate on this issue in detail. And we also address what is the NTM as NTB, number 1. Number 2, why it is a hindrance to the productivity. And number 3, what are the issues and the potential solutions. If we have a problem, I'm sure there is a solution for it. That is our webinar number 3. Whereas webinar number 4, meeting the requirement of the non-tariff measure required many steps. Equipment, filling out the form, testing, inspection, traveling and whatnot, and many other steps. This step require cost. and to add cost to the business and to the government. For businesses, in particular SME, higher compliance costs hinder international competitiveness and complicate the most efficient deployment of economic resources. Enhancing regulatory cooperation within economy will lower the cost of doing business, shorten supply chains that can help to achieve seamless commercial environment. So I think that is the interest for all the players, all the stakeholders. Okay. Before I invite the main speaker, let me go run through his curriculum. I've known and worked with Frost, Dr. Sophia, for more than 10 years. His academic credentials are impeccable and very well sought speaker internationally and in Malaysia. And today and during the last 3 series, he has been talking from Jakarta, Indonesia. Dr. Sophia is not in Malaysia, but it's Indonesia. Frost, Dr. Sophia Joso is a director of Institute of Malaysia and International Study, known as ICMAS. His education is LLB Lewis, LLM London, Dr. Loris, that is from the Institute of Economic and European Law, University of Bern. His field of specialization is international trade, international investment policy, international law and economic law, economic diplomacy, and also intellectual property management. His professional affiliation or membership are he's a barrister at law of England and Wales of Lincoln in London. And whereas his fellowship, he's an external fellow at World Trade Institute, University Bern of Switzerland, and he's a distinguished fellow at Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations, Ministry of Foreign Affairs Malaysia. He has written and done more than 40 hour research and publication under his name that are mostly trade related for ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand, Myanmar, Timor-Leste, and he also wrote a lot, done a lot of research on the intellectual property, valuation and commercialization, plus 3 of the green energy and green electricity. Before I hand over this the session to Dr. Prof. Sophian, let's do some reflection. These are Malaysian performance in the related of international. These are report related to our achievement. Look at the first on the competitive yearbook. We have been ranking on the ever since from 2017, 2018, and 2019. We have been ranked on the 22nd out of 63 countries. And in the global competitiveness report, we have ranked on the 2017 26, 2018 25th, and 2019 27 out of 180 economies. Okay, whereas our border clearance efficiency, we are ranked number 44. And World Bank Business Report, I think we have achieved a great, Malaysian have achieved great achievement in this area. From 2018, we ranked 24, 2019, we ranked 15, and in the 2020 World Report rated us as number 12 in turn out of 190 economies. These are generally some of the reports which is the nation can be benchmarked of. And out of that, MPC has been mandated by government to look after and review all the NTM activities. They have come out, MPC have come out with the government, the governance structure MPC, and it has a 3 level or 3 phases. The first phase are actually on phase 1. The task is to look and does a profiling of NTN and also the diagnosis of NTN, working together with the working group and technical expert and engage with the ministries and agency. And then follow that, they came up with on the second phase. They have done, this is very important. The second phase is very important because a lot of public consultation work has been done by NPCs and the technical experts, where they engage with generally the industry at large and various stakeholders. And last not the least, they will have to come out with the final report before submitted to cabinet report. So they have to upgrade and the progress of national to the National Productivity Council and present the status to the Pemuda and also to national committees, the Economic Council. So this is generally the task of MPC. Before then, this is the outcome or the output of their task, profiling and diagnosis of NTM. They have came out into two categories. First, they have developed a baseline and a finding. They have done that from the year 2018 to 2019. If we look at the baseline for 2018 was 632. That's for import and export, 584 for import, and export is 48, and the finding they came out with the import is 159 and 67 for export. In total 222. Whereas you look at in 2019, there's a slight down because almost ministries been covered. The general ministries been covered in the year 28. Look at the import was 23 based line, and the export was 10, and the total is 33. The finding at the import it was about 115 and 34. In all totality was 100%. So they also went into diving into the legislation related to in Malaysia. There are two types of legislation that they have dived in. One is at the primary and the second is in the subsidiary levels. The legislations that involve related to NTM. In totality, for the 2018, they have done 75 legislation. They have reviewed, studied, digest, work out how best it is. And of 2019, they have 72 numbers. So this is basically, and these are the numbers again out of the diagnosis and the profiling. They came out and total some, this is the area report in comparative to the area report. Total of NTM related to regulation 64, NTM reported to WTO was 252. Total number recorded in NTM was 713 and the product was if you look on the right corner, these are the NTM in Malaysia. The bulk of NTM come from the Ministry of the Health, Ministry of Health. There's a 500 over 502, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Agro-Based 86. You will notice that this issue will be discussed, is going to be deliberated extensively by Dr. Sofyan. What are the two NTM in these ministries? And the reason being because if you look at the non-tariff in Malaysia, 46.66% are on the technical barrier to the trades and the sanitary and biological. All two of them itself count almost 80%. Technical measures are 83.6%. In the category between technical measure and non-technical measure, so bulk of the NTM come from technical measures, and there are technical measures and technical barrier to the trade. And if you look at ASEAN country, Malaysia ranks third behind it at 700 compared to Thailand, Philippines, and Malaysia. So this is the outcome. What does the MPC wants to do? MPC have come up with the outcome with more ambitious. They want to do 100% review of NTM, and the interesting part, they want to do the cost reduction of 25% of cost compliance. So this is basically the outcome of the, okay. With that, I shall hand over this floor or this session to Prof. Sophia. But before that, let me do some housekeeping update. In this webinar, there is a recorded version of available at Pemuda Facebook. The address is http://www.facebook.com/Pemuda Malaysia. You can follow this through the Pemuda Facebook. And we love to hear questions from our audience. There is a chat column. You can ask questions or give your comment. Okay. For those who have just joining us, you are welcome to our third and fourth RURB webinar series on NTM. With that, I will like to introduce you to our speaker, the main speaker, to deliberate on the subject matters, that is NTN, SNTB, and the hindrance to the productivity in the developing countries, and to impose and to comply the hidden and the non-hidden cost of NTN. With that, I hereby give this floor to Professor Dr. Sufyan Jusuf of ICMAS. The floor is yours, Doc.
Thank you very much, Haji Rahman, for the kind introduction. Selamat pagi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First, I would like to thank everyone for joining this final session on the non-tariff measure and non-tariff barriers, and which is a very important topic for Malaysia's competitiveness as a trading and investment destination. Number two, I would like to apologize on behalf of the team because of what happened last week. We were supposed to have our third series, and apparently there was a technical problem, and we had to abandon the meeting. Yeah, that's the beauty of digital world, where if there's something happen, we can always leave and then come back again next time. In the more physical world, like last time or in the future, to reconvene is a lot more difficult. So I think this is one of the advantages, or one of the beauty of having all this technology with us. Okay, today I would like to continue our discussion on the non-tariff measures and non-tariff barriers. First thing first, non-tariff measures are not a bad thing at all. The bad thing is when non-tariff measures become non-tariff barriers. One. The same applies to tariff, because in the international trade policy making, tariff and non-tariff are two measures used by economies, by countries to restrict trade or to address certain policy matters. So, and as a result of the conclusion of the agreement on General Agreement on Trade and Tariff in 1994, which resulted in the formation of the World Trade Organization, and then followed by a lot of free trade agreements, preferential trade agreements, tariff has practically been reduced. Under, say, for example, under the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, ATIGA, as part of the ASEAN Economic Community, tariff is almost zero in many products. So basically, governments are no longer making money from custom duties and by imposing tariffs. And then, but there are certain products which are still subject to tariffs, like agriculture, which sometimes is used as a weapon to protect domestic producers. Sometimes they are used to impose a higher tariff as a result of dumping, where exporters sell products well below certain market price. And so there are still tariff, but tariff has substantially been reduced. And as a result, focus is now on the non-tariff measures. What are the non-tariff measures? Non-tariff measures are rules and regulations, technical regulations, standards which are imposed on imports and exports. So those are basically non-tariff measures. So I'm going to share my slides, and then we have quite a long session today. I think what we can do, I'm going to run the two questions. First on the issue of tariff, non-tariff measure on productivity, and then I will go through the question of cost. Again, on the question of cost, cost of non-tariff measures, there are at least two different opinions. There's no conclusive way of, now there are methods of deciding on what are the costs to be taken into consideration. But there is one group of practitioners who think that we shouldn't take the cost to the government into consideration. But I belong to a different group which think that when we do cost calculation, we should also include the cost and benefit analysis of imposing the non-tariff measure, a particular non-tariff measure, on the government. Mainly because the government will have to employ officials, they have to employ staff, they have to prepare equipment, office equipment, they have to prepare an office, and they have to do a lot of activities to communicate the non-tariff measures, the measures to the general public. So I would go on that particular line of argument that when the government wants to impose a non-tariff measure, they have to conduct a cost-benefit analysis, whether the cost, whether the non-tariff measure is really beneficial to the public, and whether the benefit to the public exceeds the monetary and non-monetary cost to the government. So that's my opening statement for this morning. So what we can do this morning is we're going to run through the slides, and then maybe if you need, we can take like 5 minutes break, followed by question and answer, which will be moderated by Tuan Haji Rahman. Okay, I've also been informed by the organizer that there could be a few participants who have not attended the previous 2 sessions. So I'm going to start from some to discuss to start our discussion from some of the earlier issues, and then this will be an introduction to those who are new, and then refreshing our mind to those who are familiar with the issue. So NTM in the era of COVID-19 is becoming an important topic because governments worldwide have actually responded at the early stage by imposing import and export measures as part of the health and economic response. Say, for example, 1 or 2 ASEAN member states all of a sudden impose restrictions on the export of rice as a result of the COVID-19. One ASEAN member state actually imposed restrictions on the export of egg. This is interesting because eggs are important in the production of vaccine. And the restrictions on the export of eggs have actually contributed to the shortage of eggs during the COVID-19. So I do not understand why this particular member state has actually imposed both the restrictions on the export of rice and also on the export of eggs. And as a result of this COVID-19, they have all the World Trade Organization, members of the WTO, will have to notify the organization. And as of 7th of October, we found there are like 80 member states with 251 restrictions imposed on the export of medical supplies, and this actually reduced the availability and affordability of certain life-saving products. And if we can see, the non-tariff measures are also affecting trade such as the agriculture sector and trade in food by way of sanitary and phytosanitary measures and technical barrier to trade. And at the same time, the increasing use of non-tariff measures may have some impact on trade facilitation. Trade facilitation includes a clearance of goods at the port. You know, when the goods arrive, as business people, we want to get the goods as soon as possible into our warehouse and our premise. So the best way is to increase trade facilitation and reduce bureaucratic procedures at the port or the airport. And sometimes in some places, goods can be cleared within 2 or 3 hours. But I have actually worked in a country where they don't have many vessels arriving, but because of their bureaucratic procedure at the customs, goods one container can take about 2 weeks to be cleared. So you just imagine they will probably receive probably like 100 containers a week, and it takes 2 weeks to clear containers in this particular country. So we have to look into beyond quality requirements imposed on the product. Last night we had a meeting at APEC on the inclusive responsible business and investment. And I suspect that if we bring in IRBI into play, into implementation, then there could be a bit more non-tariff measures being imposed as a result of the environmental sustainability requirements and also the responsible business requirement. On average, the number of NTM by the APEC economies is about 1,500 per economy, and this is higher than the global average of 586. And the biggest number in ASEAN is about 2,000 in the industrialized, about 1,000 in ASEAN, about 2,000 in the industrialized APEC. All right. As a whole, Malaysia is having something like 700 plus NTM in ASEAN, and the highest figure is actually in Thailand, which is about 1,600. But based on my observation, working in many places around the world, the lesser developed a country, the less NTM that they have, because of the nature of the regulations in the country. So that's why you see some of the lesser developed ASEAN member states like Cambodia, Myanmar, they don't have that many NTMs. It's not that because they are free or they are very liberalizing, but because they do not have the necessary regulations to meet the necessary requirement to protect, to address the issues which we will discuss in a while. So, but during this COVID, we are also looking at some countries which are taking a more liberalizing approach. Say, for example, the EU, Canada, Ukraine, and some other WTO members have actually simplified the non-tariff measures by accepting a new approach like electronic signatures for documents and certification, and by reducing certain sanitary standards requirement. And some reduce the need to have certificate of origin between the countries, and Malaysia have also granted special exemption to non-essential goods at affected ports, so imported essential goods will not be impacted. So we heard about a lot of announcement made a few months ago that the Ministry of Transport wanted the ports to have a faster clearance. Okay, Haji Rahman shared the graphs earlier. So most of the non-tariff measures are basically related to food and pharmaceuticals. They are basically animal products, vegetables, foodstuff, textile, and then chemicals. So these are mainly the main items subject to non-tariff measures. And as I mentioned earlier, most of the non-tariff measures are imposed by the developed countries. So here we see the coverage ratio of the developed countries are much higher than the coverage ratio of developing and the least developed countries. So the regulatory intensity by the developed countries are much higher than the regulatory intensity by the developing and the least developed countries. So if you combine the intensity of regulation in the LDC and developing countries, they could be at par with what have been imposed by the developing countries, by the developed countries. So that's why I mentioned earlier, the more developed a country, the likelihood is the more non-tariff measures they would impose. But why? Because of certain requirement or certain reasons, right? Say, for example, in the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff at the WTO, countries or members of the WTO can actually impose non-tariff measures or measures necessary to protect the environment, to protect the health, to protect animal or plant life or health or animal health, to protect natural resources, to protect public morality. So these are the measures allowed to be imposed by WTO members, so long as they are imposed on the basis of non-discriminatory. So it has to be non-discriminatory. They have to show a necessity, and then if they do pass these two tests, then they can actually impose. So normally what happens is they will impose, and then if someone else say, why are you doing this? Then they will say, okay, it's necessary. Then the other country say, why is it necessary? Then they have to prove, and then they will say it's non-discriminatory. And then the other two agreements under the WTO is the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement, or generally known as the SPS Agreement. And then we have Technical Barrier to Trade Agreement, or the TBT Agreement. So the SPS Agreement sets out the basic rules for food safety. Yeah, if anything dealing with food will be addressed through the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement. For food safety and animal and plant health, yeah, they impose standards and regulations. And the most important thing in regulations under the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement must be based on science. And they should be applied only to the extent necessary to protect human, animal, or plant life or health. So this is important. So under the SPS Agreement, there are things that countries may do. For example, they can impose quarantine. So if we bring in, say, lembu, a lot of people do this during the Hari Raya Korban. Some people bawa lembu dari Cambodia atau Thailand atau Myanmar masuk ke Malaysia. So this lembu will have to be quarantined at the quarantine center, say in Bukit Kayu Hitam or somewhere nearby.
Golok.
Yeah, Golok. Not Tabai.
Tabai.
Tabai or Danok, no. That one is human quarantine. But in Lembu, they go to say Golok or in Bukit Kayu Hitam. Yeah. So this quarantine then is part of the rules to protect animal health. Okay, this animal is brought in for food, so we have to protect animal health so that they don't bring in, say, BSE or any other disease related to the animal. And why we need to protect the animal from BSE or mad cow disease? Because we do not want us, human, to eat contaminated beef or contaminated meat or contaminated vegetables. So that's the purpose of quarantine. And then inspections. The SPS agreement also allow countries to conduct inspections. So say in our case, say we want to export seafood. So when we want to export seafood, say to Japan, the Japanese Department of Fisheries or the relevant health department can actually come to Malaysia and inspect the necessary facility that produce fish or seafood for export to Japan, they will have their own standards and compliance regulations. So they will ensure that all those standards and compliance regulations are met before they can actually certify the facility. So exports can only come from certified facilities, and non-certified facilities do not have the right to export particular products to a particular country that issued the certification. And this requires a lot more work. If you want to meet the standards, you have to do certification, you have to do lab tests, you have to engage people to do the certification and the lab tests. You have to pay for all this requirement. Okay, another line of regulation is the technical barrier to trade, where it states that technical regulations, standards, and conformity assessment procedures may be imposed if they do not create unnecessary obstacles to trade and if they are not discriminatory. So it has to be imposed to everyone. One. Number two is it must be necessary. And again, the WTO allows WTO members to implement technical barrier to trade or to impose technical regulations, standards, and conformity assessment to achieve legitimate objectives, such as the protection of human health and safety or protection of the environment. Okay, TBT agreement applies to non-food items. So we have to be clear. TBT agreement applies to non-food items. SPS agreement applies to only food items. And then general agreement on trade and tariff applies to all items which are not covered by the SPS and the TBT agreement. See, in the case of Malaysia, we are the champion of halal label. Although we are not the champion of halal exports, but we are the champion of halal label. So we will make sure that all products are labeled halal when they are exported into Malaysia. So this is part of the TBT agreement because that relates to the labeling. It doesn't relate to the food safety because halal by standard is not relating to food safety, but it relates to whether the food is certified halal. So this TBT arrangement, then the labeling of halal will allow Malaysia to go and check the necessary the facilities, say in Australia or in Brazil or in Argentina, to ensure that the process is actually halal from the Malaysian halal perspective. Okay, we must remember that halal also has many different mazhab. Some countries have different approach in issuing halal label. And now it's even more difficult because some countries are saying, look, halal label, you must use my halal label. Say, for example, if you want to export to Indonesia, the halal from Malaysia must then be recognized by the halal in Indonesia. So that is quite interesting to see, because the rule comes from one source, but because of the national requirement, it goes into different types of arrangement. And this will lead to something what we call it the mutual recognition arrangement, where countries are allowed to can recognize the standards, conformity assessment, or technical regulations without retesting, without re-examination, if they are mutually recognized by the countries receiving the goods. So there are three types of regulatory measures. One is technical regulation. Technical regulation is compulsory. You must meet the technical regulation imposed by a country. So this is a national requirement, mutual recognition of standards, non-trade related issues like labor standards, that we are going to discuss in a while. And then we have conformity assessment procedures. Once the government issues the technical regulations or the standards, then they have to be conformed with. And in order to show conformity, it has to be tested. It has to be certified. In order to be certified, it has to be tested. It has to go through a process of approval by conformity assessment body. And this is the problem with many least developed countries, because they do not have conformity assessment bodies. And even if they have access to conformity assessment bodies, some of the conformity assessment procedures can be very expensive. Like certification, you have to make declaration of conformity, you have to meet the minimum conditions, you have to go through registration and notification, and most importantly, you must produce the test reports. And then thirdly, in addition to the technical regulations and the conformity assessment procedures, there are also administrative procedures like the valuation system. When the goods arrive, you must value your goods in the custom declaration, or you must meet certain tariff classification, or you must produce certain type of documentation, or you must pay fees to the government in order for the goods to be cleared or to be exported. So, say for example, I give you 3 examples. I think we discussed this already, but for the purpose of refreshing our memory. In the case of the European Union, it's something called sardine. Yeah, we eat sardine. During COVID, sardine is one of the most important staple food around the world. Sardines are produced basically one of the main important exports for many countries. So during a particular time, the European Union wanted to define what is sardines. There are so many there are so many subspecies of sardines, and the European Union said this particular sardine is not sardine, and that particular sardine comes from Chile. And Chile said sardine is sardine. It doesn't matter whether my sardine is not included in your sardine, the list of your sardine, but basically my sardine is sardine because it's part of the list of the overall subspecies of sardine. So the country brought the matter to the European Union, and the European Union brought the matter to the WTO, and the WTO said the EU actually breached the technical barrier trade agreement because of the sardine is actually if they are considered sardine internationally, then the EU should not be imposing their own regulations. Okay, another case which is related to Malaysia. The case is known as the US shrimp turtle, the only Malaysian case that has gone all the way into the WTO dispute settlement to the end of it. In this particular case, the US imposed restrictions on the imports of shrimps from Malaysia because they were saying Malaysian shrimps were caught using non-TED net, basically fishing net without thread, turtle exclusionary device. So the purpose of the TED net is actually to protect turtles. So when turtles are caught in the fishing net, they will be able to escape the net and then without taking the fish together with them. The cost of the net at that point of time in the 90s was about $3,000 US. It's about at that point, I think that the exchange rate was 2.5. It was about say 9,000 ringgit. And for fishermen, Malaysian fishermen, to find one TED net, it could probably cost them a few months kind of income. So the US gave support and capacity building to some of the fishermen in the Caribbean islands, and Malaysia actually didn't want to have that. Malaysia was not getting the same treatment. So the WTO said, yes, when the case was brought to the WTO, the US said, yes, we agree, but we were doing it because of the protection of the environment and because of the protection of natural resources. That was under Article 20 of Gender Agreement on Trade and Tariff. And Malaysia won the case on the ground that the procedure imposed by the US was somehow discriminatory, in the sense that the American provided support to the Caribbean island nations fishermen as compared to Malaysia. And in this particular case, the Malaysian wanted to have arbitration and to have the law removed from the American legislative list. When the case reached arbitration, Malaysia did not provide the amount of losses, one. But at the same time, number two, the Americans were saying they were in the process. I must emphasize the word in the process of amending the law, which is discriminatory against some of these fishermen. So here you can see the standard of imposed, or the standard accepted by the organization. Basically, if you are in the process of amending non-discriminatory measure, that is taken as already taking steps. You do not have to complete the process of amending the discriminatory measure. You can actually, you can escape if you are already in the process of amending. So that is another issue. Okay, then the third case is in relation to genetically modified organism. There's also a case to the World Trade Organization brought by the US, Argentina, and Canada against the European Union for imposing restrictions and moratorium on the importation of genetically modified food. The case is known as EU Biotech. It's one of the longest cases. The report is more than 1,000 pages because of the complexity of the matter and because of the number of agreements subject to the discussion. And in this particular case, the case actually discussed the question of precautionary measure. Because as I mentioned earlier, in imposing SPS measure, it must be based on science. And in this particular case, the EU was taking the precaution. So they are not actually using, they say it's based on science, but the US were asking for more evidence of science. So the WTO panel actually agreed with the Canada, Argentina, and the US that they have to be based on science. So when a government impose any restrictions through non-tariff measure under the SPS agreement, it has to be based on science. Number one. Number two, when they impose agreement non-tariff measures based on SPS agreement, they have to be they have to do risk analysis. There is one case in the case of Australian salmon. The Australian impose restrictions on the importation of salmon if they are not heat treated. And they took zero risk. Basically, they do not want anything. So they did not conduct any risk assessment. So in this particular case, the WTO said you have to conduct risk assessment in order to impose any regulations. So the government must conduct risk assessment, whether there's any risk to the health of human, plant, or animal when imposing the standards or the requirement. See, that's why I'm bringing you this mazhab of the government will have to incur costs when they impose non-tariff measures because of the requirement by the WTO that one, they have to be based on science. Basically, in order for you to impose any non-tariff measures, based on the based on the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement, you must conduct scientific analysis. One, or if there is already scientific evidence somewhere else, you can actually refer to those evidence. And number two, you must do risk assessment. So there is cost element to the government because they have to conduct scientific, they have to go and look for scientific evidence, and they have to conduct risk assessment analysis. It's not just on the exporters, yeah. Okay, I'm taking a bit of time here because although the slides look the same, but I'm actually relating the discussion to the question of cost analysis and the restrictions to productivity. So then the UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, classified certain items as non-tariff barriers. Say, for example, limit on trade. So when we have a proportion of restrictions to of foreign to domestic goods, yeah, domestic requirement, import permits, embargoes, administrative procedures I mentioned earlier, standards where you have different standard for different people, government participation. Sometimes government participate in trade. They provide export subsidies to, say, state-owned enterprises, or in the case of Malaysia, it's called government-linked companies, providing domestic assistance programs, unnecessary charges to imports, subsidies or social regulations, and sometimes central banks impose different currency exchange. These are all examples of non-tariff barriers. These examples are non-conclusive because they can be many other measures which come from time to time. Okay, I think these are links to some of the YouTubes for simple discussion on non-tariff measures, but on non-tariff barriers. I think MPC will share the slides with you. So we will, you can watch this YouTube on your own. All right, then we have the latest issues on bans on gloves and palm oil exports to the US on labor standards. Unfortunately, labor standards is not part of the World Trade Organization arrangement. So labor standards are imposed through the arrangement in the ILO, and then any challenge to the labor standards will have to go through the WTO panel, and then I think it's very tough to challenge this because this actually relates to some of the practice which are against the law in the first place. So I think let's open this for let's carry this forward to an open discussion at the later at the end of this session. Okay, I think I have gone through almost 1 hour of our time. I will have few more slides. So one is on the NTM and compliant cost. As I mentioned earlier, NTM not just NTB, any non-tariff measure will add cost to trade because standards require information and compliance. Simple. Say, for example, you want to import iPhone charger. Dia punya kepala charger tu. Sekarang ni kalau kita pergi kedai iPhone, kepala charger, bukan iPhone lah, maknanya siapa-siapa kedai telefon, kepala charger tu mesti ada tanda sirim. Okay, must have the sirim label. Because to ensure that they are safe. That's the purpose. Sirim will ensure that the items are safe for usage. Yeah. Sebab ada case iPhone, bukan iPhone lah, maknanya charging terbakar dan macam-macam lagi hal. So, what happened is, yes, it looks simple, but the importers will have first to send the original item to Sirim. And Sirim will have to conduct tests. When Sirim conduct the test, they charge on the importers or distributors. So the importers will then charge it to the distributors, who will then charge it to the retailers, who will then charge it to us, the users, consumers. So that's why the NTM, the compliance cost on NTM is not just the cost on the exporters or importers, but they are actually carrying the cost, imposing the cost to every one of us. That has an impact on us. Yeah. One. Number two, it has an impact on productivity because if the test is unnecessary or if the measures are not necessary, then a lot of hours, productive hours, are lost to the unnecessary testing, to unnecessary filing of forms, to unnecessary compliance, and to hiring of staff. So those are the impact on the productivity. So we have to do a bit more analysis on this point, but I'm just giving you some of the items. Yeah. Whether the benefits are larger than the cost. Okay, that is also important. I mentioned this earlier. Whether the benefits, yes, the benefits is actually to protect us from fake products or to ensure that products are safe, to save us, to protect us from say unsafe food that will actually bring in benefits to healthcare and our health also. But say if we impose unnecessary barrier. Say for example, when you import food, the food must be of a certain standard. Yeah? Say you must test all cereals. Okay, cereal is a bit too much, but say ketchup. You import ketchup, and then you ask the importer to test every single bottle of ketchup imported in the container. So that is actually unnecessary because why do you need to test every single bottle of ketchup in the container? Say if the container is like 20 footer, you probably have like more than 1,000 bottles of ketchup. And it will take, I don't know, so long, right, to test 1,000 bottles of ketchup. But that could happen. That could happen if you have some kind of misunderstanding by the quarantine authority or by the health authority. And in this particular case, we have to remember that there are two types of testing, two types of precautionary approach. One is the process based, which is based on process. Basically, the food must go through the certain process, and each of the step will be examined. And one of the countries that one of the economies imposing process-based is the European Union. So if you send items to European Union, food items, they will take sample from your container. If the container, if the sample does not meet the requirement, the whole of the container will be disposed. So you cannot transfer the goods to some other markets. But the product base, which is adopted by the American and the Singapore customs, is basically based on customs, based on products. Meaning, if a particular product is considered safe, then the rest of the products using the same procedure and process is considered safe. So that is a different method. So the authorities will have to consider whether any measure that they impose will actually add cost, both to the government and also to the importers, exporters, manufacturers, and whether these measures actually bring more benefit than the cost. And we have problems in the low-income countries. Cost of compliance is higher because what I mentioned earlier, they may not have the lab. Say in my work in Myanmar on fisheries, they used to have only one lab for testing in Yangon. So if you are like from the south, in say Irrawaddy area, which takes you 5 hours to drive. 5 hours, their standard, right? Their 5 hours could be like 1.5 or 2 hours on our motorway. So 5 hours to get to Yangon to send the test, to send the material for testing, and they only have one lab. So not only you have to do the cost of traveling, hotel, and then you have to wait. You only have one lab. You have to wait for the lab result to come out, and then you have to come back again. You have to go down, come back again. In the case of Malaysia, there are many conformity assessment bodies operating here. So that's why the cost is cheaper because of the competition and because of the availability. Maybe they have branches somewhere in Penang, in Johor, in Terengganu, in Kelantan. So they have access, easier access. And another area which can contribute to higher cost is the machineries. Sometimes you have to have your own quality controller at home in the manufacturing area, and you have to engage experts in this field. So these are the issues. Yeah. Okay, I give you an example. Okay, Haji Rahman. He's not wearing a shower cap here. Shower cap there, right? Okay, this is an example of fisheries products, tuna. Okay, tuna. Okay, our team, Jeraman, some other friends, we were invited by MPC and also the owner of the tuna processing plant to visit this tuna landing in Penang. Okay, before the tuna lands in Penang, the boats have to send approval, have to get an approval to land. So they have to show that the tuna is legitimate. It has they have been caught in the through certain procedures. They are not part of the IUU or illegal, undocumented, unregulated fishing. And so when the tuna arrive at the port, before you can actually lift the tuna from the hull of the vessel, first the fishery department, LKIM, customs, everyone, regulatory department will have to jump into the boat and check all the documents. Once they are satisfied that the documents are legitimate, valid, and show the tuna is not IUU, then the tuna will have to be transported. Okay, here this tuna were going to be exported somehow fresh, or they call it live. It's not live, it's practically dead, but live in the sense that they are fresh. And so they have to comply with certain regulations. First, as I mentioned, they have to get all the documents ready. One. Number two, they have to be sent to a safe facility with a proper biosecurity arrangement. Because this tuna was going to be exported to Japan, and Japan being one of the most important tuna markets in the world, they impose a very high food security standard with a proper biosecurity measure. So in this particular case, previously before COVID-19, we seldom see this kind of clothing, right? But now during COVID, this is becoming more common. But this kind of clothing, this suit, is actually part of the biosecurity measure. So that any pathogens or contaminant from the person who processed the tuna is not transferred to the fish. So you see they put on gloves, they put on hazmat suit, and everything is clean. If you look at the flooring, it's actually properly layered. Yeah, and the table is made from stainless steel. So all these are examined by the importing country. And then they are put into the box, also subject to certain standard requirement. They have to be layered, and then only 2 fish. And then in the belly of the fish, they put in the blue ice. So that is also a requirement. You cannot simply put any ice. Ice is also subject to checking in fishing sector. Okay, then these are the boxes. Those are ready to be, almost ready to be exported. They have to be labeled. You can see the number and all the labeling requirement there. They have to be sent before they are sent out. So in this particular case, to meet the requirement, the fish had to leave the facility in Bukit Minyak in Seberang Perai to the Bayan Lepas cargo terminal by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you just imagine the fish arrived something like 7 o'clock in the morning. It had to be transported with all the reefer properly, the proper cold storage, and then they were sent out to the Penang Bayan Lepas airport cargo terminal by 2 o'clock. So within 5 hours, everything has to be ready and completed and met all the requirements, not just by the importing country, but also by the receiving country, Malaysia, and meeting all the requirements imposed by the regulators in Malaysia and also in Japan. So those are the requirements. Yeah. If you deal with this kind of products, you have to really be hands-on on the regulations, standards, and technical requirement that you have to meet. So, but sometimes the procedures may not help. So in this particular case, they are subject to Jabatan Perikanan and LKIM. In this particular case, LKIM, Lembaga Kementerian Ikan Malaysia, this the regulator. So you look at the process, terima dokumen dan sokongan dari pemohon 1 hari, membuat pemeriksaan premis 1 hari, mengeluarkan borang bayaran 1 hari, terima resit bayaran Okay, I do not know whether this bayaran will have to be online. Can it be online? And then proses dihantar ke ibu pejabat secara online. Okay, proses dihantar ke ibu pejabat secara online. Dan ibu pejabat semak, hantar balik kelulusan ketua pengarah lagi 1 hari. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hari untuk lesen import. So if you want to import this fish, you have to get the lesson and you have to wait for 5 days or 6 days or 1 week. So here, the importer of the fish product or the fish will have to work backwards. They have to know when they have to start applying, right? If you miss the deadline, say your 5 days is actually hari cuti. Say all of a sudden you have say public holiday in between, and your public holiday is not counted, so you really have to work within the limited time, and then you have to work with the LKIM to make them understand the requirement. I think by now they will probably have a lot of experience dealing with this, but these are regulations, these are requirements which have to be complied with. Terima borang permohonan elektronik pun 3 hari. So hopefully they can cut down, and I hope they have cut down on the number of days and some of the procedures, because the approval will have to come from Ketua Pengarah. What if Ketua Pengarah is on leave, or I think the Ketua Pengarah probably have actually delegated the function to the officers. Okay, I have some more slides, but let's go through this. These are my work in Vietnam. So Vietnam has been going on the fishery export for the past many years. They are not only exporters, but they are now also importers. There's an increased competition from Indonesia, India, and Thailand, and there's also a drop in fish price and slowdown of import demand in the major markets. You know, so the trade pattern, they export mainly to the major exports are mainly European, Japan, and United States. So they are basically exporting just frozen fish fillet and shrimps and prawns. So these are Vietnam. So they don't export that much live animal. So the 5 largest export products account for 90% of the total export of Vietnam. So their key products are import products, shrimp, lobster, black tiger. Because of the society, right, Vietnam is now becoming richer.
Yes.
And soon they will be richer than us. Soon we may have to find jobs in Vietnam, not the Vietnamese coming to Malaysia. And so they import mainly from India, Indonesia, Taiwan, Norway, and Japan for domestic consumption. Okay, what do they find? 75% of all measures relate to sanitary and phytosanitary and technical barrier to trade. Basically, food safety related, and maybe also related to labeling, to size. We must remember there is another thing called private standards, basically imposed by supermarkets, by private purchasers.
Yeah, see.
Okay, if you want to sell ikan, the private standards, the private party will say, look, 1 tilapia must not exceed 1 kilogram. So they will say, okay, the margin is between 900 to 1.1 kilo. Anything below or anything above will be rejected. So you must be able to produce tilapia of 1 kilogram each, which is quite tough, you know, to be able to maintain thousands of tilapia at the same weight, at the same size. In Switzerland, for example, their mango must be of certain color. Same goes with banana. Okay, kalau pisang yang ada tompok-tompok hitam tu dia reject sebab dia kata dah rosak. Kan? Kita kat sini Yang ada tumpuk hitam tu boleh beli lagi sebab nak buat cikodok. Dia orang tak ada isu cikodok. So for them makan pisang kan. Kita pisang boleh berbagai penggunaan. Cikodok, lempeng, makan saja, makan dengan aiskrim dan bermacam-macam penggunaan lagi. Goreng pisang. Dia tak ada. So byproducts, food sector has experienced the most tariff measures, more than 10 NTMs or at least 20 NTMs. And the most stringent, this relates to my earlier assertion that most stringent SPS measures are by advanced market, such as Japan, the European Union, and the USA. And they have excess of standard value of certain antibiotics. So basically, they may impose higher requirement. So they probably say, okay, your antibiotic must not be above certain percentage. And this percentage could be lower than the normally accepted percentage of antibiotic content. So here they have access, most of the standards imposed by Japan, EU, and USA access the standard value of antibiotic, appearance of prohibited antibiotics, bacterial contamination, hygienic condition and control, labeling is TBT, veterinary drug residues, additives, and heavy metal. So everything is tested. So you must go to testing facility that can actually produce a report containing analysis of all these items before you can actually send your fish to USA, Japan, or the EU. All right, Vietnam is in trouble already because of they have a lot of shipments subject to their warning. Okay, what are the reasons? Reasons for rejection. Reasons for rejection include content mycotoxin, additives, bacterial contamination, veterinary drug residues, pesticide residues, contaminants, heavy metals, adulteration, or missing documentation. Okay, missing documentation can actually cause trouble for you. Hygienic conditions, control, microbiological contaminants, labeling, packaging, and others. So if you look at this, you see the US has a lot of rejection based on bacterial and hygienic control and labeling. So it's not easy to enter the American market if you are selling fish, and Japan too. Yeah. So there's a need to there is also increased trade remedies like anti-dumping, where they impose a higher tariff, and then unstable source of inputs, unstable quality, higher cost of production, strong competition for similar products, rules of origin, meaning that you have to produce a certificate, and higher requirement of labor and environmental standards. Vietnam also faced insufficient logistic services, high cost, like cold storage and other things. Yeah, uncompetitive from neighboring countries like Thailand, inadequate infrastructure, services at seaports, storage facilities, and cold chain. And they also face administrative procedures by local government, by local authorities, like connection among relevant agencies. They don't connect to each other. Inconsistency in enforcement. Some of them, they don't enforce, or they use discretion. Frozen rate of fillet catfish, granting of conformity certificates. Okay, so then I go to taxonomy of regulatory costs. Here, just one slide, maybe it will take just 5 minutes of your time. Here we have regulatory costs. So first you have to meet the compliance costs, administrative burdens, and then substantive compliance costs, such as implementation, direct labor, overhead, equipment costs, material costs, external service, which you have to pay, and labor will have to lead to say wage cost and non-wage, basically salaried people. Administration and enforcement, you have to comply. Also, sometimes they come and look at the products at the location. Financial opportunity cost. Sometimes you do your test and then all of a sudden it's not approved, or some other people have actually access to the market in a better way. And of course, the macroeconomic cost to the government. So I mentioned this earlier. How about cost to the government and the regulators? Because the government will have to employ scientific evidence. The government will have to ensure that the risks are properly assessed under the cost and benefit analysis of risk assessment. And there are many other costs like quarantine, like checking. You know, if you ask for someone to send you the certificate, say certificate of conformity, that there's no antibiotic on the fish, or what are the percentage, someone has to be able to read. You cannot be giving the certificate to someone who doesn't understand what that certificate means. So that is cost. But of course, the other mazhab will say the cost of the government is zero. For me, the cost to the government has to be taken into consideration. So okay, that's it. Haji Rahman, I am back to you. I will stop sharing, and then maybe we can take 5 minutes before we can go for our discussion.
The next agenda is question and answer. I have some question prepared. Do you want to read for me, or I just shoot the question and you just listen?
I leave it to you. I'm okay either way.
Okay.
Shall we take a break and then we come back again in 5 minutes?
Meantime, I will just.
I nak kena minum air.
Okay. Meantime, Hanif, let me go to some of the summary. We share. Let Dr. Sofyan rest for about 5 or 10 minutes. In the meantime, I will do some of the analysis, the conclusion analysis of before we end up this session. First of all, conclusion analysis of RURB webinar. Okay. Initially, the first session, when we was talking about our 4 series, we were talking about the non-tariff measure in the area of COVID-19 from the health and safety to protection. So look at COVID-19 is a crisis, not only happens in Malaysia but also worldwide. It affected everybody, every nation, every nation, every race, every gender, from the rich to the poor, and one. It affected everybody. So if we look at right now, the crisis have even reached about 46 million. Suppose the 46 million milestone, and the death is 1.2 million. Can you imagine? This is worldwide. This data came out from John Hopkins Hospital. And in Malaysia alone, we have supposed about 33,000 of COVID cases, and we have this is the latest data given out by KKM. We have a case baru. It's about 8 every day now. We have about 3-digit figures, and our now the jumlah kes keseluruhannya total confirmed cases about 33,339 cases, and we have death is about 251. And on the right side, that's in the state level. There we have a numbers of the cases in state, which is generally started, and in the Klang Valley, one of the highest areas are in Klang Valley. Apart from that, we have the Sabah issues after the election and whatnot. So this is the current scenario of COVID-19, and I think the slide, Hanif. Okay. Hanif. In fact, also look at the social impact of pandemics is in our education. We have children and youth out of school. It's almost 90% of the world student population are not going to school. It's not going. And young people classified as net. Net means they are not in education, they are not in employment, they are not in the training. So where are they? They are doing nothing because of COVID itself. Look at the social impact, how it impacts the nation itself. The whole workforce is being locked and doing nothing, and it's not productive, it's not producing anything. Okay, the next one. Okay, well, the second series we were talking about was our agenda, the importance of complying with the NTM. Why NTM, the issue of compliance is very, very important. This is to ensure the safety and the quality of the products, either for import or export. Everybody has to do that. And to do that, you have to have the right action, taking the right action to achieve and the right attitude about meeting the compliance issue. All right. So the next one is also Anis. The next one. NTM compliance management is not about another efficiency system. It requires discipline and culture, the mindset of the stakeholders, especially. So we are talking about administrative burden, we are talking about efficiency, we are talking about effectiveness, we are talking about productivity. All in totality is question about efficiency. It talks about the discipline and the culture of efficiency. Next, Ani. And this is involved with the leadership and also the requirements of the tools. You need tools. Apart from to have that comply with that, first of all, you have to have the right tools. Okay, at the end, we have standards, we have the good practice, and we have other legislation, technical regulation. I think this has been deliberated very well by Dr. Sophia. What are the compliance tools that you need to require? And this require compliance tools cost money and cost money for simple reason because you have to maintain that. Number two, you got to hire expertise to make sure that they know how to handle the tools. And number three, it has a built up cost in the product and also in the process. So the next one. So when we talk about compliance system, we are talking about the ecosystem of our compliance system. We need to say everybody is the value chain, yeah? Right? As Dr. Sofian mentioned, from the producer, distributors, retailers, and it end up all to the consumer. So this value change is very, very important to make sure that everybody understands and everybody has to comply. The most important thing, understanding of the compliance, and number two is how to apply that. And the third series we will cover on our NTN was on the, and there is today, that is also be covered today. That was actually the NTN, SNTB, and the hindrance to the productivity. So there are government initiative of how to deliver and reduce cost. That we call it in MPC is RURUB. So the most important thing when you want to have procedures or policies or whatever it is, first of all we have to ask whether it's legal. That's number one. Number two, is it necessary to have the policy? This is sometimes they just have a policies or regulation, but they do not the impact analysis of that, what is happening. And number three, is it efficient? By having these procedures or policies or whatever it is, do you see is necessary? Okay, this is the reason why the government has to ensure that regulation is it necessary for some. Number two, is it fair? Number three is it effective? And it is affordable to all the enjoyed by the broad degree of public confidence. And the job of government is to get it right, providing frontal protection and making sure the impact of this being regulated. So this is most important thing. Okay, and the next issue of compliance, whether it is okay. Earlier we have seen Dr. Dr. Sufyan was talking about the detail of non-tariff barrier, limit to trade and whatnot. So NTN is an instrument that we use, whatever. So we normally in Malaysia we use untapped definition for our non-tariff, that is positive measure, apart from the ordinary custom that prevent. These are the definition. Next. Okay. What are the roadblocks? As Dr. Sophia mentioned earlier just now, the roadblocks are most of the roadblocks in the NTN, non-tariff measure, came from two areas. One is a sanitary and phytosanitaries, and another one is technical barrier to trade. Both of these constitute about 83%. 82.9 to be specific. The majority of NTN in Malaysia are either SPS or technical barrier. They are about 82.9% of NTN in the country, which SPS is 36.3 and TBT is about 46.6. The next one is the between technical and non-technical barrier. Next, Hanif. Okay, we look at non-technical tariff barrier. There's two areas, and non-technical barrier constitute about 83.6%. So this is generally. Next one. Okay, the cost. Next one. Okay, basically, Dr. Sufyan mentioned was the importance of cost-benefit analysis. Why we need to do that? The component of the framework, the anatomy of cost. But it is also important to have accurate data. Data accuracy is very important in the hidden and the non-hidden cost of NTN. So, because we found out the NTN can increase trade costs about 3 times more than the tariff, especially in the small firm in developing country. Next. So, okay, generally as an analyst, this is our analysis before we go to question and answer. Our first session, the RURB webinar series, that's the area of non-NTM in the area of COVID-19 from health to safety. The numbers of audience we have is about 101 in the Zoom platform. And at that time, we did not have a Facebook platform. So we have eight questions, even it's not small numbers, but it's a very tough question. It's a quality question at that day. And then the RURB webinar series 2, the importance of complying with the NTM. We have in the Zoom platform, we have 92 audience, and Facebook. That's why we start opening our Facebook, Pemuda Facebook. We have 160 audience. And then the third series, that we even though it's we have a technical glitch, but we still have audience, about 80 audience on the Zoom platform, and on our Facebook platform is about 100. These are the graphical representation of our analysis of our RURB webinar series in India. So with that, I will conclude my summary of the this webinar. But before that, I would like to ask question. There are certain questions. There is about question that I'm going to post to Dr. Safia. So, Doc, are you okay right now? Okay, there's one question.
Okay, I'm back.
One back.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay, ada dah.
Can you see the question?
No.
Okay. Okay. If you can see, do you want me? Let me share the.
Kejap, Q&A tak ada. Kat sini tak ada. No open question.
Okay. Okay. There's two question post for public. Okay. But meantime, there was let's give the question public question first. Okay, the audience question. Okay, from Ahmad Domi Tabe. Salam. In our advancement of IR 4.0, should the government rely on NTN as an encouragement to the manufacturers? So that's the first question. Okay. Then from the question that I received, number one, trade barriers such as tariff has been demonstrated to cause more economic harm than benefit. They raise price and reduce availability of goods and services, thus resulting on net in a lower income and reduce employment and lower economic output. What is your opinion and your expectation with the potential solution? That's number one question. Number two question, the Trade Facilitation Agreement, TFA. Its goal is to make faster, easier, and cheaper the movements of goods across the country and border. What is Malaysian initiative to this direction, and what is your opinion of this? So number 3 question, this is regarding to unilateral trade liberation. Trade is the single most important invention made by humanity to improve the condition and the welfare. It is so vital as to be essentially inherent to human nature. Why do we need to create more hindrance such as NTM and NTB? Instead, we should be practitioner of unilateral trade liberalization nation. What is your comment? So this is a 3 question. We have 2 more questions, but in the meantime, we have 4 questions. Right? Can you address that question before our 12:30 deadline?
Okay, thank you. I missed the second question yang panjang tu.
The trade facilitation, is it?
Bukan, sebelum tu.
The trade barrier.
Cuba baca selepas IR 4.0.
The trade barriers such as tariff has been demonstrated as to cause more economic harm than benefit.
Okay.
They raise up prices, reduce availability of goods, thus resulting in lower income, reduced employment, and lower economic output. What is your opinion about that? Because of barrier, this is very straightforward barrier question.
Okay. Thank you. We have 4 questions. I think on IR 4.0, we see, and I would like to answer this together with the trade facilitation.
Okay.
Okay, the trade facilitation agreement was one of the achievement of the modern, not really modern, but the recent achievement of the World Trade Organization. It was agreed in Bali, and then it's already been implemented and ratified by most of the member states, WTO members. So what happened is in our recommendation to the government during the COVID-19 reform process, we recommended to the government to increase the digitalization of the process at customs and some other agencies dealing with trade, say quarantine and other things. 1. Number 2, we are also encouraging them to increase the number of staff, employees who are able to handle the new technology. So we have to train the existing staff, customs, quarantine authorities, and some other authorities, and then make sure that the new generation joining them will have to be able to handle all these technologies. Okay, on IR 4.0, I think there is a need to look into, say, blockchain. How do we use blockchain? Because if we use blockchain, we will be able to see uninterrupted and certified data. Basically, the data is easier. You have easy access to data, and you know that these data are safe and these data are reliable. So I think blockchain is an important part of this seamless transfer of goods from various countries. So
also don't forget about the destructive technology, and AI also will help.
So
to be
so
more
these
efficient.
are the examples. So I really encourage the government to look into adapting this IR 4.0 and new technologies in the customs, and then the procedures to clear goods throughout. But we must remember, even if we introduce IR 4.0, we have to work with others. Say if the goods depart Port Klang and arrive in London, so the facility in London has to be at par with the facility that we have in Port Klang. So there is, between 2 advanced ports. But if you go to less advanced nation, say if you send products from Yangon port to Port Klang, that is quite a hassle to actually request Myanmar customs to be at par with the Malaysian facilities. So that's where we have to have some kind of capacity building, technical assistance, and support to all these various regulatory organizations in ASEAN. Okay, that's IR 4.0. So back to trade facilitation. Customs, I think Malaysian customs and Malaysian authorities have started to look into the needs to reduce non-tariff measures. That's why the government decided to appoint MPC to be the implementing agency to reduce this. And that's why we are here today to discuss this issue. So I think one of the initiatives taken by the customs is the introduction of AEO, Approved Exporters Organization. So basically, if you want to export, you can go to customs and register yourself in the system, and your organization, once approved, will be given the AEO recognition, AEO status. So you will have a faster and a better access to the custom facilities, and the processing will be faster because they will use the electronic processing system and whatnot. Yeah, so that's important. Another angle which I think MITI and the government has already been trying to implement is the single window. MIDA, for example, have actually launched their single window for investment. And in ASEAN, there's also a process under ATIGA, the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, to introduce a single window in ASEAN to facilitate trade. And then self-certification for certificate of origin, ROO. So some of exporters can actually self-certify themselves instead of having to go through the physical certification. Now some of the exporters, right, you have to go ambil borang, bawa pergi mana, Chamber of Commerce, CHOP, lepas tu pergi MITI CHOP lagi, lepas tu bawa pergi custom. So tu yang physical. Tapi sekarang ada sistem they have been working on this called the self-certification. Basically, if your organization is recognized, you can self-certify yourself and subject to audit. So they will come and audit you, which is a better procedure. You don't have to send your dispatch to various places and get chop here, chop there, chop everywhere, and then you waste time and money. Okay, I think those are several initiatives taken by Malaysia which are significant under the trade facilitation agreement. Okay, then the next two questions, I lump this together. On the question of hindrance. Okay, non-tariff measures can be very tricky, but I would probably say, look, the term could be sometimes a misnomer, because some of the regulations are very necessary. Say, for example, you want to make sure that the fish that you eat do not contain a certain amount of antibiotic or certain amount of preservatives, or vegetables do not contain certain amount of pesticide, herbicide. So these are important for us. So if we say that all non-tariff measures are bad, it's not true. So I would probably, if I have my way, I would probably want to change the terms. It's not really non-tariff. I mean, it's really non-tariff, but basically they are necessary regulations for food, for production. You know, say for example, if we want to eat something, nowadays we are very cautious about our health. So when we want to buy, say, cereal, we read what is the content in the cereal. You know, how much sugar, how much this and that. These are necessary for us in our daily life. of course, I think to impose this on makcik keropok in say Terengganu or Kelantan, to put the nutrients information on the back on the plastic of keropok, that will be a bit too much. But if they want to export the keropok, they have to comply, because the countries importing this kind of fishery byproducts will actually impose regulations, because this relates to food. Okay, what is the problem? The problem is when you have people who impose unnecessary barriers. Like in the case of tuna, I discussed earlier on the sardine. Yeah, this is a live example of you want to protect your sardine industry, fishing industry in the North Sea in the EU. So they say, okay, only sardine which are caught, the species of sardine which can be found in my area are called considered sardine. Any other sardines which are not found in my area are not sardines. What the heck? They are sardines. So, so that is unnecessary, right? Unnecessary. Okay. In the case of palm oil, okay, we have been fighting over this palm oil for a very long time. Okay, the EU says it has to be sustainable palm oil. The American says the palm oil must be attended to by laborers meeting the labor standards. Like they are not forced labor, they have to be on contract, they have to be paid properly, minimum wage and whatnot. Okay, fine, these are good. But when you are saying, when you impose unnecessary restrictions like it must not be planted in certain area, it must not be, you must not kill certain species, or you must not employ child labor. You know, some people in the kampung, it's not that they want the kids to go to the farm, but it's part of the family life. You know, people go and work in the kebun. So that's an example of sometimes unnecessary restrictions. But we want the market. So we have introduced something called the MSPO, the Malaysian Standard for Palm Oil. And we are ahead of all these sustainability issues. But we are facing problems because a few other palm oil producers are not able to meet the standard. And meeting the standards are not cheap. So you just imagine if you run a big, say, a big plantation like Sam Dhabi, they can afford the certification. But if you deal with a Felda area with, say, 300 peneroka in one Felda, running 10 acres of land, palm oil small farm, you cannot ask every one of them to certify and audit their facilities, their small 10 acres, because the cost of auditing is the same as probably becoming very expensive percentage-wise. So they have to introduce something called community auditing, community certification. You go into the kampung and certify everybody. But then you have to ensure that everybody is actually compliant with the required standards. So that, I mean, that is on the question of management. So yes, we may not agree, but somehow we may have to comply because of the requirement by the importing parties. So
okay, we have about 10 more minutes. Can we take one more question, or do you want to do submissions?
No, I think if they have question, that's very good. Okay, there's
one question, but I think this is a very sensitive question.
let's address this.
Let me put it this way. I would take the question comes from
open. Okay.
Okay, you want to open. Okay, this question comes from Encik Muhammad Zurairi. The question is, Malaysia should close down markets like Australia, since it does not add value to the current procedure, and should allow digital verification, especially on the certain perishable product. So, do you want to take that question?
Okay, this is very interesting.
Interesting and also very sensitive.
Sensitive, interesting, and we have been subject to a lot of debate in our NTM work.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I think it's not about marquees, it's about procedures. Okay, if you go to Australia, they also have, they lump this together under the customs. Okay, once you reach Australia, when you fly to Australia, you have to fill up a form. In the form, you have to declare ada makanan, ada tumbuhan, ada daging, ada ubat-ubatan, all kind of things that you have to declare. And they are very strict, right?
Yes.
So if you are caught, there's no way out. You have to pay the fine. It's a very strict liability. So that's how they deal with the question of biodiversity and food standard. And I believe that the question of protection of biodiversity and food standard and health and safety issue should be dealt through one single agency. And we have many agencies already. So why don't we think about customs doing the work? You know, we train the custom people, and because they are the frontliners dealing with all these issues. And so then the custom can actually handle it seamlessly through the their system. Because if we have another agency, that particular agency will have their own system, which has to be connected to the customs. So that's my answer. So I somehow answer you in a very roundabout way.
Sometimes can be it's better to be roundabout because it is generally a very
But I
question.
think what they need to do is based on our research. There are certain things that need to be reformed, or there are certain procedures which can be better. So yes, we need to look at consolidation. I think consolidating all these procedures and organization too.
Okay, since we have another 10 more minutes, do you want to take one question or do you want to do submission?
Ada lagi ke?
Ada. One last question, okay?
Jawab.
Can trade liberalization help reduce cost or potentially boost trade, especially in the developing country like Malaysia? Then attached with this, there's more question. What are the harmonization and the mutual recognition help both the trading partners adopt a common NTM and the reciprocal system of NTM? What is your opinion on this initiative?
Okay.
It's a question of trade liberalization and also the harmonization and mutual MR.
Okay, trade liberalization. Trade liberalization basically allows trade without much restriction and allowing reduce protectionism, allow free movement of goods. I think that's good for business, yeah, and good for the economy, because if you allow higher level of liberalization, then you have easier access to certain items. One. Number two, you reduce cost. Number three, you increase competitiveness because more people will be involved. Say, for example, beras. Okay, beras. At the moment, beras is subject to certain regulations. You must go through certain person or certain organization in order to import beras. Okay, their argument is simple, to protect the rice industry. But if you want to protect rice industry, you work with the farmers, not with an organization importing beras. Yeah, you work with the farmers. You help the farmers. Give them technology. You know, some people now use 5G.
They know the process. They are process owner.
Yes,
they know.
Yes. You work with the farmers, Nafas or Koperasi or whatever. Yes. And give them the technology, give them the management skills, give them the ability to manage. Upscaling and increase the production.
Yeah.
Okay, that will increase their competitiveness. So work with the farmers. But to actually disallow importation of beras just because on your argument that you want to protect farmers, that's not right. Because there are certain, if we allow our rice farmers to be highly competitive, not only they can be self-sustaining, for Malaysia, but they can also export high quality beras. That's what happened in Thailand,
Yes.
in
Vietnam.
India. Surprisingly, India
Yes.
they're okay. Some other things like because we have so many legacy issues which need to be addressed. So I am a believer in not only liberalization uh, for import, but also liberalization in the domestic market among the domestic players, not just for exporters or importers, but the domestic players must also be on the same playing field, so they can actually uh, imports and exports and process their products, sell their products on the same uh, footing, in the market, in the domestic market. Okay, soalan nombor 2.
I think that
Covers it all.
covers all. Do you want to say the last word before we end up this session?
I want KFC.
Yes, yeah. You have to ask Anis and the secretary. Okay. That's NTN
Okay.
issue. That's NTN issue. NTB.
Okay.
Okay.
In conclusion, I think we had 4 sessions. Like
Yeah.
I never thought that this final session can actually run for almost 2 hours. I
Yeah.
thought we could be done by 12 o'clock. Okay, NTM is a very important topic. And most importantly, we have to ensure that the NTMs do not become NTBs. So even if they become NTBs, we are small fry in the big pond. So Malaysia somehow will have to meet the challenges. But we have to be strong. So if some other people impose NTBs on our products, we must be strong and take them to the right avenue. So if we have to take them to the World Trade Organization, we have to take them to the World Trade Organization. But we must also do justice to our own players in the domestic market. So we have to liberalize, we have to reduce our own non-regulatory barrier. This is part of our RURB. We have to reduce our own regulatory barriers to increase the competitiveness and productivity of the domestic players. Okay, so thank you very much. With that note, I thank everyone for attending, and I think we have been having a good session for the past two weeks.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sofian. We have one question from the Zoom webinar chat. That was from Cik Syam Irma Macha. I wish this session will organize again in the future. A very good session. Any plan to organize this session in the future? That's a request. And again, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the sponsors, the RURB units of Malaysian Productivity Corporation, and Cik Hanif, Cik Wan, our facilitator, the honorable speaker, Professor Dr. Sofian Jusuf, and especially the die-hard followers and the audience of this webinar. Confucius said, "What I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. Let's do it together. We have heard and what we have to do. We have seen what we need to do. Now it's time to do it, and together we can do it. It's time for me to head out and find a route to success. Have a fantastic day till we meet again, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh."
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.